Good morning, everyone. Good
Good
afternoon,
morning.
good evening, wherever you are. We're here to talk about setting up Jira and Confluence for DORA compliance today. And as we're here, I'm curious where from are you joining us today? If you can let us know in a chat. We'd
Just
love
give
to
us a
see that.
hint. It can be continent, country, or a city, all depending on how are you feeling comfortable sharing your location. Don't worry, we do not check that evenly. We won't be writing up your pings or IPS.
It's a charged question. We have a weather forecast open here in the background, and we're monitoring the temperature in the place where you are. We have Katowice, we have Krakow, we have Koblenz, and Oslo. Nice.
And strong Rzeszów representative. Okay, that one we won't read for the global for the global audience. Rutka, I believe we leave it as it is.
I'm envious of Oslo. 21 degrees. Think about it.
True that.
All right. We'll give maybe one more minute for everybody to join. The room is filling in. And what's the weather like in Wrocław today, Adam?
Like I believe in most of the Poland today, for like a little bit chillier than the last weekend. Like we do not have any more 40 degrees Celsius in the shadow, more or like 28, 29, 30. So you could
Oh,
almost say,
28 is quite nice.
yeah, you could almost wear a blanket. So it's not that bad, right? In
It's it's
comparison,
all
in comparison though.
it's all about training. After those past days,
Yeah,
wearing a
true,
blanket in 28 feels very proper.
true that.
Okay, it feels like we're ready to go. So once again, the objective of this webinar is to talk about DORA compliance and a simple yet very effective setup in Jira and Confluence to prepare for the audit and efficiently be able to monitor and manage risks in real time. My name is Michał Kłakowski. I'm serving as Director Service Sales and Strategy here at Divinity, and with me is Adam.
And thank you very much for introduction. My name is Adam, and I am the principal consultant at Divinity and also the leader of the Atlassian consultants at the same company. And with that in mind, I allow myself to give you just a brief introduction what the Divinity is about, since we are being backed up by quite a few certifications and also the fact that we are platinum partners in both solution and the marketplace partners area. But besides that, we are also the company which is very heavily invested into the Atlassian. We've got over 330 different engineers, consultants, and other specialists working alongside those tools or using them in conjunction with other software as well, with different setups and different needs and business requirements. We've conducted over 50 cloud migrations over the past years, and overall, we are one of the longest being players within the Atlassian game for over 18 years right now. So in some European countries, we could be drinking alcohol with our experience in that areas. And for that, I'd like to forward the voice about why you should stay up until the end of the webinar.
I love that drinking alcohol with our experience. That blows my mind. Um, my favorite part of all those webinars, and we have that little tradition in the series, is that we have a bonus for you by the end of it. So bear with us; it's going to come. And next to that, another tradition is that we manage those materials in a knowledge hub. You're going to get an invitation by the end of it. So not just this one, but also all the past webinars you're going to get access to, including the material.
And just to give you a glimpse what the webinar is going to be about and its overall structure, we obviously start with from the general to the more detailed approach. We'll start with discussing the stakes and the gaps that are revolving around the Atlassian audits and why most of them are failing or could fail. We'll also then go through the three actions that you could do in order to make your system ready. So that includes operation within the Jira, operation within the Confluence, and how to connect all of this together throughout the evidence chain. And last but not least, we would like to focus on what should be your plan and what you could do almost immediately, as well as leave some time for the Q&A session there. And
All right, that's sorry for this. That's fantastic. And now we're going to play a pre-recorded um, content of this webinar for you, which we built up front in order to avoid hiccups related to technology. Where all the time here, we're going to be answering your questions by the end of it. So please feel free to type the questions in the chat if you have any, and enjoy the show.
So now we're going to give you a practical guide of implementing DORA in your organization. Remember that DORA is really tool agnostic. Some people tend to think that it's about buying a system that does it. In reality, it's a couple simple concepts that can be implemented in many different ways. We're going to show you a simple way of leveraging your existing Atlassian instance to build such a process in your organization. Why does it matter? Well, violating DORA, if it applies to you, can come up with significant fines up to 2% of a annual turnover worldwide, and including personal fines to the senior management. So if you take, for example, a 500 mil revenue firm, that quickly adds up to potentially up to 10 million fine. So that's a significant responsibility and a reason to have a look at this. And the way to implement the process is really not that complex. Most organizations have all the necessary data and they still fail those audits. Most organizations that fail those audits, they do that on structural reasons. So let's focus on the process for the moment. What is DORA auditor really looking to see? Well, three main things. Number one, you need to prove that you're managing your incidents, that there's a proper incident log with a timestamp and classification rationale. On the right-hand side, here you see the specific articles that this is required, which is this triggered by. Then the next thing is the risk register, showing all possible risks with their severity, ownership, review process, and eventually you have a control that you apply to mitigate this risk. And eventually the third thing, which is a glue in between those two, is the evidence chain, showing how a specific policy maps to a specific control, how does it trigger, and how this process is put together. The general rule during the audit is that in a conversation with auditor, you have 15 minutes to prove that you have this information readily available. If you need to search for longer, you need a significant effort to pull that information. This automatically fails the audit. So the purpose here is to expose that information, have it readily available at your fingertips during the audit. But in reality, the target, the goal here is to prove that you're continuously compliant and you really have this information at your fingertips at all times. So the four gaps that are the most common here is number one, the lack of canonical classification, which typically is a result of organization sprawl. Let's imagine that you have single process, but different departments take it in different directions, and eventually you have no single place to look at risk. This is a finding, is a fail. The other usual case is the risk register in a spreadsheet. It is there, but there's no revision history. There is no proof that it is maintained or reviewed regularly. And it's a finding, it's a fail again. Then a third one is a broken evidence chain. So you have those objects, but they are separate. There's no link in between, and there's no proof that this process is actually working in practice every single time. And finally, the manual classification trigger, which is a way of judgmentally classifying the tickets. It needs to be foolproof. It needs to work in a predictable way every single time. So that's the framework. And now let me pass over to Adam to walk you through how you can implement that in Atlassian.
So thank you very much, Michał. So in essence, is exactly as you said. Every time when we think about this compliance solutions, every time when we think about how we would like to build this upon, how to actually make this solution working and being able and it being able to pass through the audit, we are usually missing the structure there. As you said, we've got the data, we've got the people who knows those things, and we've got the tools such as Jira Service Management or Confluence that with its own setup, you are able to do so and configure it in a way that's going to meet those requirements. In order to do so, though, you need to know exactly what you are looking for. And sometimes it's very hard to compile the knowledge from both the legal compliance world and with the knowledge from the Atlassian ecosystem and what an Atlassian can do for you. So when you want to do it for the first time and you want to do it in your first iteration or a phase even, you can go three relatively simple actions there. You build your major DORA incident issue type in Jira Service Management. You create with the help of a proper setup and the processes as well as the automations your incident risk register in the Confluence, and with that in mind, as was said even before, you build the glue that gives you this whole evidence chain that gives you this exact road from when this incident has been created up until the moment when we classified it, adjusted to our needs, resolve it, and got the proper documentation of actually doing so. So, going with that, let's start with the first action generating your incident issue type in Jira Service Management. It's pretty much straightforward thing to do, only with a few things to keep in mind that all of these items, all of these attributes that issue type provides you with, they can be later reused for your Jira query languages, filters, for your reporting pages. And essentially, what is important for this step for all of you to like acknowledge is for the DORA itself, it does not essentially care which tool are you using. It only cares about the data that the system can store. And issue types are perfect example for that because you can store all necessary information within it. So going with that, you need to go for the proper issue typing here. We are calling it major incident in this context. We go for a few mandatory classification fields. We also remember about the fact that it's not only about the issue type itself, but also about how the process which we contain within the workflows is necessary here. We also remember about the classification that's going to be used directly within the Confluence, JQL filters to help you set this up. And what is important, two things. It's not going to take much of your time to set this up. If you're experienced Jira admin, it's only around 90 minutes. And also about the fact that when you think about the DORA, and as we have even previously compared, it reflects to the exact articles and expectations of this particular regulatory requirement. So going with that, there are a few fields that you need to think about as the mandatory there. It's not only the summary, it's not only about the priorities, it's about the client, geographic spread, reputational impact. Obviously, we won't be going through all of those, but essentially those seven needs to be on your incident, and at some point into the process, they need to be put in here. And thanks to that, they need to be stored and used directly throughout the process. The
So
person who's going to
that's
take it.
interesting. So we're basically talking about 7 fields that apply to every single type of DORA incident, and that is enough to describe the incident in the system.
Exactly. Like in especially like it's you might think, okay, but how it is possible that only 7 fields could meet that criteria? This is like a big regulatory statement. There's a lot of talks about this, but when it boils down to it, it we came up with that, and it meets the expectations of the auditor. And as you said, it's later important how you store and structure this data rather than how actual amount of it is in here. So going with that in mind, it's also important to remember that those fields they are going to be stored on those tickets. They are going to be visible throughout the process. People are going to be able to pick up some information directly from the fields, be it the custom fields or the text fields. You've seen the types of those. And thanks to that, we are going to have enough information to go and process it directly with our dedicated workflow. The workflow is not maybe that complicated. There are a few steps in here. You need to remember about the automations. You need to remember what triggers it. So when you go with classifying the incidents, you need to have a trigger for the next step. So adding more of those fields that are going to be replicable here. You need to remember about the automation that when your agent goes through the process, then the system recognizes this step and automatically generates a Confluence page directly into the Confluence, obviously. And what is important? Connection between those. So the process go on, and the Confluence and the Jira ticket, they have exchange information between each other, and they are being stored in a format that actually meets the criteria there. And thanks to that, I believe it's also something that can be related to you, Michał. Whenever you build a certain overview, we got two artifacts, but you no longer need to apply and write down that much of a data or do some of your manual work at your end. And I'm telling you this because you also, as the head of, as the director for the service sales and the strategies, you know how much time people spend to actually build and proper reports within a certain structure.
That's correct. I think the most beautiful and appealing part of this setup that you are describing to me is that it is in a way a self-documenting system. You don't need to do any extra activities to pull up this knowledge and prepare for the audit. It is just sitting ready for audit continuously.
Exactly. And that's the part when we come up to the second action of our solution is to build your ICT risk register. The Confluence name you have already seen into the previous step. You get the incident, you classified it into the certain steps, you pull in enough information so that you have everything that you need to have as an agent, as a person who processes it, enough of information to classify it. But building a Confluence page is not enough. Of course, automation with Jira, automation with Confluence allows you to do so. But what you need to remember that this ICT risk register has a certain structure that you need to be complied with. So it's not only about having this simple connection between incident and the Confluence page. This is important. It's like your report or the information that you cut from the incident, but it's also remember that you need to utilize the Confluence feature of building this hierarchized structure. So you've got your pages that are visualizing clearly what's the structure for your ICT risk registers. And of course, within the structure, the proper setup of the data and the information that you got from an incident, you build a space which is going to contain three main type of pages: ICT risk register, incident reports divided and categorized by year, ICT policies, so how you actually address those incidents and how you actually address it in the context of this particular evidence, and evidence and control, which stores this information and then the Confluence and actually visualizes everything. With that in mind, when you build this in that direction, with that order, your audit is going to basically write itself. So you no longer worry to put the proper report or the proper data into the which page and at which structure in this page. We build an amount of automations that after we classify and finish taking care of the incidents, the information about it is going to be stored and added into the appropriate place. And which is the best and most beautiful thing I try to cite that Michał is the fact it's going to be written down on your own. No manual work. Focus on doing and resolving this, and you get everything that you need to build your registry there.
That's right. And on top of that, the important thing to notice is that in the organization, those multiple risks, they would also have their separate owners that determine what is the risk severity, what is the way to deal with that risk in practice. And this space also becomes a collaborative workbench where those multiple owners can manage their own risk as part of the joint structure, which is difficult to do if you do it in a file. But if you start using a dedicated Confluence per risk pages, it becomes much more logical and easy at scale.
Exactly. And that brings us to the last step that we would like to do. So that would be so how we build this evidence chain. So to give you a certain connection between those areas, you've seen that we start with building two separate artifacts that we connect with each other throughout the process. We've got the Jira incident issue type, and we've got the Confluence page that reflects on what we did for this Jira. We then set up a steps. So when we classified it and go throughout the process with those parameters that we have set up, the documentation is being created and it is being connected to the incidents. Then we go a step further. So we build the documentation, okay, but we build it in a certain structure. So we see now exactly which Confluence pages are associated with this particular incident, particular risks that are going forward from those incidents. And we get that information within the Confluence. And whenever we resolve next issue or do the next step, the according pages are generated automatically. Therefore, when we go further with that, we can build a structure that now connects those policies and the way we addresses those incidents to each other. So we not only have the ability to link the issue, the incident issue type, and the and the resolved report from this, but we also got the policy that we address for that purpose and connected to each other. When we've got those control policies connected, we can build a separate report that shows exactly end-to-end process for that. And last but not least, those parameters, the parameters that we have used at the very beginning of the presentation that I have shown you, they are queryable and then can be queried into those Confluence pages. So the reports are going to be built upon itself about the next coming areas. And that brings us to the policy to proof. So this would be a great question, something that you have already it would mention me how in here, but it's also the fact that when we build those connections between those entities, we build a certain practice that is very much applicable for the DORA policies. But we need to always remember that those mechanisms and themselves, they can be to some extent reused for other processes or for the overall documentation process that we have within our company as well.
Yeah, I'm sure when you're looking at it coming from the risk management background, you will recognize certain pattern, like a risk matrix controls operational evidence that those controls are in place is a foundation of every type of risk management framework or methodology. They're applied here for DORA regulation, but the very same flow is really reusable for any compliance audit you can think of, which is risk related.
Exactly. As you have seen, and you have even mentioned, it's only 7 fields at the very beginning of the process. And yes, obviously, along the way, there are more automations or there are more steps that needs to be considered, as well as, of course, verifying if this data is structured and created correctly. And of course, from time to time as well, you need to recheck if everything is built the way you intended to at the very beginning. But as I said at the very beginning, to mention once again, when you boil down the configuration itself, it's not that much of the items, automations, or scripts that you might think of, and you actually meeting your quota there, which is very beneficial because everyone who thinks about those processes immediately thinks about dedicated systems like some sophisticated ERP or some additional things that would require a truly heavily and chunk in our budget to do so. With that, we work with the tool that allows us to meet those quotas. And with that in mind, I'd like to mention also the fact that thanks to this, we also are able to monitor the regulatory signals, what is very helpful for the users, for the people who actually need to then transfer this knowledge to the dedicated systems, financial institution. In Poland, is going to be KNF. In other countries, there is going to be different financial institutions. The fact is, now within the Atlassian, we have a system that stores all of that information. And when you need to fill this out to this other institution, you need to build up your report, and you need to do this in a certain timely manner. You have everything that you need, and you no longer need to store this information in some external Excel file or gather this from the multiple different places within your organization. Now you have it under one place, in many cases under one ticket even because it's about one incident, and all of the fields necessary to meet those requirements and quotas, they are already there. You just need to open this up in one split view and then open up a second view in your regulatory system uh, software and then pull this data directly in here. And this is where this truly shines as well, because the amount of time what we encounter is the highest amount of time that you spend on gathering this information and structuring it properly. Whilst with Jira, we build all of this almost automatically. So, what would be the like how it would look like when it comes to the audit? What's going to happen? You've seen that there are a few questions at the very beginning that your auditor could ask you that you should ask yourself when it comes to this process. With everything that we have discussed today, when it comes to the reckoning and choosing this, you for each one of those questions, like what was the last 12 months of the incidents, why which with this one was particularly major, when it's your what's your critical asset register for that. You have every action and every place in the system where you can open up directly those data, pull this up, and use this as the foundation for your answers. And it's not going to take much of your time, 90 seconds, 30 seconds, one click to find everything that you need for this particular audit, and compare it to the actual data analysis, format browsing, templates browsing, documents that you have created in the past, to the stuff that you can do in essentially 30 minutes in order to be ready for any type of the question, which is easily queryable and easily findable. And of course, this is one thing, like this is one thing because you can always think about, okay, so this is what we are solving, but even as for the other regular process or even the complexities of the implementation of the DORA itself, it's not obviously everything. You can't cover every type of the activity that you need to do with those areas and how we go and address all of those topics. But what we certainly cover and what we certainly can be done into the other extensions areas, this is the stuff that we need to think about and address them accordingly. Because remember, just because we have a great solution and a great your go-to free action, that does not mean that you have like the solution for every complexity and every issue that comes with that.
No system on its own is solving any regulatory compliance challenge. This is these are the interfaces towards third parties, both upstream and downstream, and these are elements which require more organizational alignment and arrangements. But but the core backbone of the system that we described is enough to get you up and running, and have that core part passing the audits.
Exactly. And when you think about this as an example of what we have said before, when you take a look, for example, NCA reporting portal, which reflects the Article 19, and the fact is, as I have mentioned, the submission for that, it happens outside of Atlassian. And you can't kind of mitigate that with Atlassian currently. There are different APIs, different regulatory policies, and we always believe, and it is regulated, that we need to have the human in the loop for that. But the important thing is, as I have mentioned before, it helps you with the process. You get all of the necessary information under one tick, and then you can much easier fill out this form outside of the Atlassian, but it won't do it on your own with the solutions that we have just talked about. So actually, I believe that brings us to the next part, was what's your Monday morning plan, Michał, then?
Yeah, let's come back to the promise, because we started this conversation from promising that it's really easy to get going with Dora. How to make it practical based on what you've seen. Assume you have a week to get it up and running. The first thing to do is create that DORA major incident type and unlock reporting, and to have an information gathering stream up and running. And also in parallel, identify those critical risks that you have to seed your risk register, and run a mock internal audit to understand how do you assess and control them today. From there, you can move to action two, which is basically 45 minutes to stand up a DORA space and template the risks with the proper pages. At the same time, implementing the ownership structure and the cadence to review them. And then finally, action three is the glue in between them, which is the a JQL filter that maps a specific policy to Jira Ethic to create that evidence chain across the board. At this point, you have the basic structure up and running. So by Friday, you can say you are basically audit ready. Of course, the question remains: is it all risks? Do you need to in the process of review find better controls? But you have a system that is supporting the whole process.
And just to maybe not to interrupt, but just to mention something, this is why we've put it that you can test run this. So as Michał mentioned, I'm coming a little bit from this legal regulatory departments of the software. And, beside the fact that you can build the whole around process, just run it through. You don't have to go, and I wouldn't recommend that at any step in that to do it. Don't do the testing on the real life incidents. Just create a few sample ones that you have in your current portfolio, as Michał said at the very beginning. You usually have this data, you just lack the structure and try to map it on your own. Uh, in most cases, you probably feel at the very beginning a little bit confused because seven more attributes, how to map this, how to actually link all of those things, how does it work, when does it show up. But after this initial week, you are already going to see how much easier it is for you to actually gather and structure this data, and it's going to be way easier, especially later when you practice it even more. And not to mention the benefits when the actual incidents are starting to come in, and you are no longer bounded by the internal SLAs, by the SLAs that comes with the regulatory department. The time, the very short time that you need to fill out every data that you need, and solve the incident. Besides that.
And because audit is about communication, this internal drill helps to prepare, lower the stress bar, make sure that you and your team really feel ready for such an activity and instinctively to find things. And this leads us to my favorite part of each of our webinars, which is the bonus. Um, if you feel that this is still a little bit overwhelming, we're happy to provide you with a free DORA discovery call, where we'll walk with you through your existing risk framework, discuss it, and determine what is the shortest path to implement that in Atlassian. If you are interested, basically just use the link in our follow-up email that you're going to receive after this session and simply reply to it, and we'll schedule 30 minutes of time free of charge to help you get up and running. With this, let's move to the Q&A part, and we'll be answering your questions live.
And that is entirely true. So I'd like to start with the question posted by Sophie about what about the fact that if we are on the Jira software and not Jira Service Management. So this is like an interesting question because I have said throughout the webinar that technically it's more of the matter of having the appropriate attributes and all of this being set up rather than having the accurate product. In that context, it is kind of a different because why we use Jira Service Management there and why we decide to go for it is usually because of two things. It's because of the fact that firstly, it allows you to build dynamic forms out of the box. So you're using the Atlassian software only to build out the forms and the way they behave dynamically, and they utilize your configuration directly that you store within the assets. And of course, then you can build up the whole process for managing the incidents, as well as the separate module for the incidents and multiple out-of-the-box channels for inputting those tickets. You could technically, of course, use the Jira software, build up some dynamic forms, use the different form and application. But when it comes to the ease of use and how would you like to utilize, I would rather highly recommend include your incident management team and use the Jira Service Management and give the full credibility for Jira Service Management to actually manage, compare, and use all of these features that it has. It's just that much easier to build the system around this when it might be straight impossible to maintain and build as on the Jira software, whereas Jira Service Management products gives you those things already.
Great. There's the next one there. The question goes, we work with ServiceNow and we have a risk register there. Do we need to duplicate it? It's probably not a good idea to have two separate risk registers. What's your take on this, Adam?
So in my honest opinion, when you take a look at that from that perspective, I wouldn't recommend it. Like if you have something that has been like pre-approved and has been working and to the extent and you see that it could fill out the necessity for the necessity for your auditing process, the risk of rebuilding that into the another software and trying to apply this and map this accordingly, it's not worth the risk in that context, I believe. So I would rather recommend that if you have that in that mind, of course, leave it as it is. But of course, the devil is in the details. So depending on how you set this up and if it's actually meeting all of your criteria, and as I said, I said once again, it's more or less about adjusting the system with configuration rather than being this accurate, exactly software that you need to deliver this process.
All right. There is one more question which goes in here. Should this initiative be company versus team managed? We've spoken briefly about the risk of fragmentation that is a fail in the audit. So definitely this technical setup supporting DORA should be single one per company. And of course, you delegate to the team that is responsible for technology. But in order to successfully implement DORA in the organization, you need a proper sponsorship and you need one initiative per company, 100%.
And I second that. Like when it comes to setting all of this up, like the flexibility of team managed projects are not applicable there. You should be working with company managers that much easier and way more safe when it comes to building the whole solution around it.
That's great questions. Any others from the public? Antti is typing.
That's the pressure. And how fast is she going to type?
No pressure at all.
It's usually like this when you've got all of those group chats and there's like someone who's like typing for like 3 to 5 minutes and you're wondering how to configure it to be DORA compliant. So Angie, this is actually a great question. And in all honesty, this webinar is kind of an answer to this. Like when you're going to rewatch this, just take a look at the overall summary of what we've been talking about. But just to sum it up, you essentially need to focus on setting a proper request type and of course according issue type. You need to set up those parameters that are going to be reflected by the custom fields. Then with those custom fields, there is like the whole flow that needs to be adjusted with the usability of the forms, exact steps that we need to take a look at, fields that needs to be filled with the users. Then Confluence configuration, so that every time when the Confluence is being configured, then you've got those automations, actions that build those reports. And of course, instance-wide configuration. Okay, let me get back to this. And then after you build up those Confluence these Confluence pages, then you connect this with the automation and the proper structure within the registry. Instance-wide configuration. Well, if I get that question correctly, you might always like trying to correct me on this or make it more clear. But when we set up those settings for the issue type, workflow schemes, issue type schemes, field schemes, and obviously templates for the Confluence and the structure for the space, then your instance is being Jira compliant when it comes to the process itself. As for the product, when we talk about what the cloud environment provides you with, what those products provide you with, all of those necessities, like being able to trace down what's been happening throughout the incidents, changes done by the administrators, and all of the other features, they're already there because there are always two dimensions to that. One is what the product can do and how it is being utilized. And the second one, do we even meet the criteria in the system itself process-wise? And today we are focusing mostly on the process-wise area, like what you need to configure on the administrative level to get and be DORA compliant, the very least in those 3 steps for the quickest audit that you can have. And the other areas, like let's say technical requirements, like the system being able to log and trace down those changes, this basically gets that.
And maybe it's fair to ask, Antti, does it answer your question? Is this the answer you're looking for? It's unfortunate we do not have a microphone, like a two-way conversation, but that's the nature of the platform we're on, that it's only a typed conversation one way. So we can talk, but we unfortunately cannot hear you.
So this is essentially how you need to configure it, because when you migrate to the cloud platform, you meet a certain criteria that DORA applies on you, like what your system needs to have. And then the second step would be adjusting the process in a way that we've just described briefly, map this out, and how we set it up during the webinar. And then when you've got that, and this is how you approach and take care of your incidents, then you can say that you are DORA compliant.
I think I know, Adam, where this question is coming from. Let me take that from a little bit different angle. So what we're doing here is we're building on top of Atlassian the system for managing risk. But the question is, are there any specific risks related to the Atlassian platform on its own that we should manage? This question really depends on the nature of data that is processed on Atlassian platform in the other projects. So I think this is something that ideally is a candidate for our follow-up call. As I mentioned before, you're going to get a summary email after this event, and we're happy to schedule a 30 minutes call where we'll go through your existing risks and explain how does it translate. Please note we're not DORA auditors ourselves, so the process of distilling the risks within the organization is something where we can work with you, but we're not going to take it on our own. However, the real answer to this question is start from the data you're processing in Atlassian, then make sure that you have right controls for the risks there, and then in the very end, express them in a system you're using to manage your DORA reporting, which could sit on Atlassian as well. And there's quite a couple questions that happened in the meantime. So let me read them out loud. The first one is, can the affected hardware field be used in a dashboard?
Yes, it can be used, and there are multiple ways to do so.
And one more question, can I have the recording of this session shared later this session, as I have joined late and could not get...
and our organizer, Kate, already answered that. Thankfully, yes, it's all going to be shared. It's all going to be shared with you.
As part of the Knowledge Hub,
Exactly.
by the way. Any more questions? I can't see any. So with this, we're going to thank you for joining us today. I hope this 46 minutes was useful for you. And feel free to get in touch after, so that we look at your specific setup and build something useful together.